second season of a show that was meant to be a first season. We end the season with probably the most pointless episode yet. Hey guys, coming out for the season finale of Wayward Pines, Season 2, Episode 10, Bedtime Story, and I was really looking forward to this episode, especially last week, presented a lot of really cool ideas for this episode, and the season in general, recently I've really been liking it. Even though we had that really weird twist last week, I was really hoping that we'd be able to move on from that, I'd be able to get behind it, and that this episode would really impress me. And I have to say that while there were some good scenes here, this was a pretty average finale. I mean, there really wasn't that much going on here, rather than what we expected to happen, and anytime some sort of a conflict happened in this episode, it was very quickly resolved. Overall, for me, this, I'm not gonna lie, was probably the most boring episode we've had all season. This episode in general was boring. It really was. There wasn't a ton of stuff going on. It really just felt very pointless and really just ends a season that was meant to give us, promised to give us all this interesting new stuff and really just put us right back to where we started. And let's just get in this episode because it was really disappointing. I was expecting a really good finale or something at least like last year's finale, and we got nothing like that. We did get something at the end, but other than that, we got nothing. But let's just get in this episode. We start off with everyone's freaking out because Jason's being rushed to the hospital after Carrie shot him. Oscar's freaking out, but Theo says he's just another patient. Carrie is covered in blood and very shell-shocked, obviously because of what's going on. Margaret, and also because of this new information that Jason's just presented her, she's kind of trying to figure out if it's right or not. Margaret's healed and back on her feet, screams out a cry to hear Abby's, and many of them run off after she sounds the call. They go leaping through the woods. She cries out again and again, then she stops. One Abby stops and sniffs and looks around. He's staring down at this gigantic settlement of other Abbies. He sounds this call, and they all form up and run off, and you got all these Abbies here. The problem with this episode, honestly, I think the biggest problem is that we don't really feel threatened that those Abbies are going to come back, because we barely see them in this episode, believe it or not. We see them at the beginning and at the end. That's it. And you expect us to see a lot more of the Abbies, and we barely see anything. And obviously, we know the Abbies are going to come invade the town, but it never seems to happen in this episode, and we'll get into that in a second. But basically, in Wayward Pines, the call is made for extractions. People are low into vehicles. They're told that they won't be coming home once they leave, and basically that they need to just grab grab their loved ones and get to the pods, because obviously they need to get back in the, the cryogenics pods, and Theo operates on Jason, takes out the bullet. Jason begins to crash, and Oscar starts to panic. Jason is bleeding into his lungs, we see, and unfortunately, Jason does in fact die, and I care to a degree, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad he did, because I didn't really want any of this ridiculous drama between him and Carrie, so I'm glad that he's dead. I already thought he was gonna die, so honestly, this didn't really do much. I already knew he was gonna die, and especially because they said they spoiled it in the previews for this episode that he was gonna die, so I thought the death news were interesting. Theo calls time of death as Oscar stands there stunned. Carrie watches in the observation room in horror, and she's kind of in disbelief as to what has happened. And we then see a crowd has been assembled at the hospital. Theo comes out, tells them that the evacuation has begun, and they'll all be safe. He tells them that Jason died and served the town at best as he knew how. Theo says that they can honor him by fulfilling his wish to survive, and Theo says that Wayward Pines needs strong leadership, but not a dictator, and that's exactly what he feels they don't need. They don't need a dictator, and I like the way that Theo kind of just took charge here. That's kind of what I wanted from the beginning. I wanted Theo to be the leader. I mean, Theo's supposed to be our main character, and he really wasn't much of a leader besides being a doctor, and that's something that I think that's very different about Ethan and Theo. Ethan was someone that was reluctant, but when it came time, he did in fact take charge, because he ended up being the mayor. Theo, however, never really had that power, and finally it seems like he is in power. He says many of them didn't ask to be there, and he didn't. He says that they are there, and humanity will begin anew with them, and that's their destiny, and Theo says he'll see them on the mountain and go back inside. Rebecca is then with Xander. They look very concerned. Theo talks to Oscar about patience and then calls out an error he made on Jason's surgery. And he says he's never seen Theo make a mistake and asks if it was on purpose. And basically Oscar denies it. And Theo tells Oscar that he did everything he could for the patients. He tells Oscar that he'll be a good doctor someday. Is it me, or have we not seen this character that much? I mean, I don't think we've really seen much of anything of Oscar. I mean, it seems like he's kind of just shown up out of nowhere. Arlene runs up, and Arlene in this episode is a joke. I mean, I don't know what the actress in this episode was actually doing, but wow, did she have some bad lines here. I mean, basically, she gushes to Theo about how she loves her job and she thinks they can make a difference in the future. Says she'll see him in the mountain. Then she keeps being like, I'll see you in the mountain. I'll see you in the mountain. I'll see you in the mountain. Like, she's so seductive about it. It's so weird and it's just weird, really. I mean, that's something about Arlene is that it never felt like she was a true three-dimensional character. It seemed like she was a cartoon, and it's stupid. I don't really find it funny. I find it stupid. And Theo hugs her awkwardly after she acted weird with him, which I don't blame him for acting awkward, but still was really weird. Theo then goes into the room with Jason's body, finds Oscar there. Oscar tells him that Jason's body type is AB negative, and it's rare, and he says Carrie also has that blood type, and asks, isn't that strange, obviously, since she has the blood type. And at this point, they don't know that Carrie and Jason are mother and son. So obviously they're kind of confused as to why this is going on. Theo's then called to come talk to CJ in his office. CJ tells him that the pods are almost ready. He says he can explain to him how suspension works. Theo says that no thanks. CJ says that enact families will take up a lot of room and they should leave out non-essential adults and store younger people. And he shows him this list and says Jason made decisions about who to take and says Jason made decisions quickly. Theo asks about Jason as a boy and CJ says there's no point arguing over him and Theo says that decisions must be made. CJ says that the Abbeys will be here soon, and says more than 300 people have never been woken, and he could wake some of them up to free up pods. Basically, as we know, they only have a few pods. They don't have all the pods available. And basically, if he wakes some of these people up, then it might be the best thing to do. And CJ says he's choosing who to bring and who to leave behind, which is life and death decisions. And, obviously, they have this really difficult task of if they leave some people behind, how are they going to feel? What's the impact of that going to be? I thought all the setup here was really well done. In fact, I'm not going to lie. This I was really enjoying. I like this setup here. I thought that was really good, and then we get to this really good scene where obviously Theo knows that there's some sort of connection between Carrie and Jason that he hasn't seen before, and he talks to Carrie, who asks if Jason suffered. Theo asks if she wanted him to, and she says she doesn't know, but Theo says a pod just opened up and calls Jason a tyrant, and Carrie defends Jason, says he was doing what he thought it was right. Theo says it's all a rotten lie, and Theo tells Carrie that she and Jason have a very rare blood type, and Jason was stored in a pod as a baby around the time she delivered a child, and says that Pilcher changed her file, and he walks out, and Carrie does the math on this, and basically just puts two and two together. She obviously throws up, realizing that she was sleeping with and killed her son. Obviously, it's just not something you really go through every day. But again, this doesn't really serve much of a purpose, and this is my real problem with this twist, is that it doesn't change much of anything. Carrie making the decision she makes at the end of this episode has no bearing on Jason being her son. No bearing whatsoever. The only reason it makes sense, like I said, is because Carrie's so protective of Jason, and also because we knew all season she was hiding something. This just feels like a bit of a stretch, and it just feels like a random plot point they put here, and to be honest, doesn't really change much of anything, and you definitely do see that here. So the Abbeys run through the forest in mass numbers. They scream as they run, more now below Margaret as she stands high up on the rocks. And again, you're just not really feeling that threat. It feels like, they're gonna get in there someday, but you're just not really feeling it. Theo then grabs a gun from his desk, takes it into his pocket, then smashes the photo of Pilcher that was on his wall because he's so against Pilcher and all the things that he did. And this felt like a long time coming. I mean, it feels weird that suddenly Theo's so against Pilcher in this episode. Well, he's been the entire season, but why is he all of a sudden so against Pilcher when he didn't even know the guy? I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. So in the mountain, people are being in process to get into the pods. They are told that they will go in as families and must have ID to get into the pod room. CJ, Carrie, Theo, and Mario head to the mountain. CJ gives Theo an update on the numbers, and the announcement in the town is made to wait in their homes until they are picked up. One family is split up as an older, out-of-shape father is held back. Total be in the next load while his kids cry. They did some good stuff here. I thought they did some good stuff. They just cut it a bit too short. The young people at Wayward Pines Academy are loaded up. Frank was left behind with other small kids we see, and he tells some other kids that they're group 2, and the young kids ask him what's wrong with us. Frank reassures them, says they'll come back for him. Now, I thought they were really going to get into this idea that Frank can't go because he's homosexual. Remember that one episode they teased that Frank is homosexual, and because of that, and Frank might be homosexual, and because of that might be feared in the town and something that's not around in the town? Not even brought up in this episode, not even brought up for the rest of the season. And that's something that really pissed me off. I really wanted to get more into Frank's character, so when you have Lucy crying and asking for Frank, she's shoved on the bus. You just don't feel that tension because they're not showing why Frank was really left behind. I mean, I really want to see more going on there, and there's just not really a ton going on. Lucy sees him upstairs in the window. Frank runs, but a guard grabs him, knocks him to the ground, and hits him hard, knocks him out. Lucy cries and wails. A guard pulls her away from the window as the bus drives off, which is crazy, but you understand, obviously, why he's not allowed to go because they think he's gay, but it's just not really brought up in the episode, and I get it that they were trying to do it subtly, but it didn't feel very subtle at all. It felt very in your face, like, oh, he's gay, so he can't do that. I wanted a conversation about why he can't go. I wanted to see him possibly taken to prison. Honestly, if you're going to make Frank suffer, you need to pay the full price. You need to just, you need to make him fully suffer. And honestly, not gonna say, you guys know I'm not against gay people, but for this plot, I don't think they made him suffer enough. I really think that if they fully wanted to make Frank suffer and show, what people of his, what gay people go through in Wayward Pines, I really think they should have shown it because they didn't really get to show it here. It didn't really happen the way I wanted to. Whatever happened to the burnings, I don't know, and it felt really underutilized, I have to say. That's basically the theme of this episode, is underutilized and underwhelming. Especially with the next scene, which, this was just dumb. Honestly, it was dumb. The guards come to pick up Rebecca, but they tell Xander he's not on the list. They tell him to wait there. Why Xander's not on this list, I have no idea. I mean, it seems like he's only not on the list to create drama between Rebecca and Xander. And Xander and Rebecca stare at each other nervously. Rebecca's upset, then says she won't go without him. She wonders if Theo did this. Xander says maybe no one did this. She's upset, says they just worked things out. Xander holds her close and says he loves her. He'll be there when she dreams. He kisses her, takes her by the hand, leads her to the van. She finally goes, but she's looking back very sadly, obviously knowing he's not going to be able to go with her. Xander puts on a brave face for her, and she leaves unhappily, and I'm like, alright, this is actually a good plot point. They need to kill off someone, so Xander's going to be the one they kill off. That's what I was thinking was going to happen. So CJ comes to talk to Theo in the labs for another update. He tells Theo there are no guarantees in life. Theo says that he's held lives in his hands before, but they're saving the human race, and it's completely different. CJ tells him that he's been saving this world all along, and yeah, that really is true. I mean, CJ's the character that is probably in the worst position here because, again, if you remember, he feels he woke everyone up too soon, and he feels that, he has to do this again. He doesn't want to make a mistake, and Theo says he fixed things, was never spiritual. Pilcher played God when he brought them all here. Theo says it's not the case. Everyone here would have lived their natural lives if they had been left alone, and yeah, I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, if there weren't all these ridiculous laws, then a lot of this stuff wouldn't have been going on, and CJ asks why he's using the past tense, saying you fixed people, then asks if he's not planning on doing it anymore. And the Abby's running groups continue amassing before Margaret. Mario checks the monitor, sees that it's a veritable swarm of Abby's at the fence. Obviously, they're freaking out that they're there. Arlene is then in front of the hospital with some others waiting anxiously to be picked up, and chaos is reigning in the streets of Wayward Pines as people left behind. They're beginning to riot, they're breaking windows, they're running amok. I mean, it's just chaos. People are just going nuts, and Xander watched it all fall apart. He watched down the street with a rifle over his shoulder, and I was thinking Xander's going to be the one to take charge here. Xander's going to assemble an army. That's what I thought they were going to do, is that Xander was going to assemble an army to take down the Abbeys, and that was going to be a cliffhanger, that they're going to go after the Abbeys. And I wish they would have done that, because it's a lot better than what they end up doing. Theo watches the screens, the amassing Abbeys. He makes a recording that says Pilcher was wrong about everything, and basically just says everything that we already know, that Pilcher was wrong about everything and trying to save humanity, create a town ruled by inhumanity. He says they ran out of food, the enemy's coming to them all. I mean, this is all stuff we've heard before. He tells them about viruses the Pilcher stored, says he plans to infect himself with the 3 most virulent strains, allowing himself to incubate and then go outside the fence to be consumed. He says he estimates that this should kill off the Abbeys, and it's just, he basically wants to sacrifice himself. He's going to sacrifice himself, and I kind of was like, I knew this was going to happen. I kind of predicted he was going to do that because Ethan did that last year. I thought the same thing was going to happen to Theo, but we'll get into that in a second. So Theo says the best guess about what he has to do. He says for those that wake later, perhaps they can have a new life. He also says the idea of the greater good is false. There is no greater good. There's only good. He ends the recording, and that's how he feels. There isn't really a greater good. And really, yeah, in Wayward Pines, there's only good and bad, really. And that's something the show is inherently wrong about. I mean, something the show doesn't do right is that it doesn't portray these characters as people. It portrays them as good or bad. And I get that that's the world, but it's just something that the show has never done right. I feel like the show has never really done characterization right, and that's definitely something that I think is very clear in this episode. And even though we had some interesting character dynamics, characters this season have really been lacking, and I'll talk about that at the end of this at the end of this review. But he also says the idea of the great good is false, and basically he ends the recording. Mario tells him that Rebecca's on the way. Mario tells him that there's no trouble at the gate. We see Rebecca and some others hustle through the angry mob at the gate. One stabs a guard, then CJ fires an automatic weapon as a warning, tells them to get back and run home. They step back screaming. Rebecca comes in, Lucy hugs her. They each realize that Frank and Xander were left behind. Frank goes to the shop and sits with Xander, who's drinking. Frank asks for some of his booze, but says he's too young. Now, let me just say, this was a good scene. I actually really like this scene between these two because you kind of get the sense that this is where we're going next year, that maybe these two, characters that we're going to be seeing, they're going to be on their own next year, and that this is going to be kind of like the narrative for next year if they were to set up a third season. That's what I thought they were going to do here, but Frank asked for some of his booze and said he's too young. Frank asked what it was like outside the wall, and Xander says that it's scary. It's scary in here too. Then he slides the bottle over to Frank, and he takes a swig, and Frank tells Xander that Rebecca is like a mom to Lucy, and yeah, I mean, that's true, and there's just not really much of a conversation here, really. I mean, it's kind of just them talking about how great Rebecca is and things like that. So, I don't know. I mean, it just didn't really do much for me. And it could have been a really good scene between these two. I thought they were going to talk about assembling an army or something like that. I thought Xander was going to be talking about, we got to fix things in the town. We got to change some rules because, why the two of them are not being allowed, which we never get the reason why Xander is not allowed in the pods. What's the reason? I don't know. I mean, Frank is obvious because Frank clearly is homosexual, but Xander, we have no idea. What is the reason why Xander is not being allowed in the pods? It doesn't make any sense. So it seems like it was, like I said, it was just there to create drama, but before anything can take place, Theo then speeds up in a Humvee, tells Xander and Frank to get into the vehicle, and it erases any sort of tension or any sort of narrative going forward, and this completely ruined the entire finale for me. I mean, I get that Theo was trying to be a hero here, but come on, saving everyone just didn't make any sense, and CJ made it inherently clear that they're not going to have enough room to fill up all the pods. He said that very quickly. So how the hell is Theo able to rescue everyone and get them into the pods? It just made no sense to me. That seemed like a huge error that they had and really ruined a lot of the rest of this episode. So they get on the Humvee or whatever, but then some men block them with a Molotov cocktail. They tell Xander to get out of the Jeep and says they need it. Xander uses his rifle to shoot the bottle, and the guy is doused in flames. They drive off, and at the gate they see dead guards. Arlene is there, says he could just have told them. She thought that she did a good job for him. Tells him to say hello to the future, goes to walk away. Theo says she can have the dead guard's bod. She gives him a passionate kiss on the mouth and thanks him. I mean, just a really weird scene. All of a sudden, it seems like these two are together. I don't know. They rush inside, and why would you save Arlene of all people? Arlene's barely been a character. Like I said, she is a cartoon. Why'd you save her? And she's clearly just wants to get together with you. Why'd you save her? I mean, I would have just left her behind, but CJ shuts the door behind them, and it really just made Theo look like he is just kind of like a pussy where he doesn't want to take the chance and just let anyone die. He's not willing to let anyone die. It just didn't really go with his character. I mean, I get that Theo's a nice guy, but there's nothing wrong about him. I wanted something wrong about him, and it doesn't seem like to appear that there's anything wrong about him at all. And this episode definitely shows that. It makes him seem like he is the titular, hero that's just a good guy, and everything's great, and nothing's bad with him. And that's not a good character. That is not the character we have been following for 9 episodes, and that's really my problem with Theo in this episode, is that it really made him seem like he was this great guy that did nothing wrong, when the truth is there are many things that he did wrong. There are many things that we got behind him. He was a human being, and in this episode he's just kind of a hero, and we definitely see that. So Xander asks why Theo saved him. He says he doesn't know, and that just that just sums it up right there. Theo has no idea why he saved him. Why the hell did you save him now? I mean, it makes no sense. CJ then says that things must be different. Arlene, Xander, and Frank and Theo ride down in the elevator together. CJ says they get them processed now. Rebecca's happy to see Xander and hugs him tight, but realizes that means Theo may not be coming. And CJ then tells Carrie this is not her fault. She says he doesn't know. Says he doesn't know, and Pilcher and Jason aren't here, but she is. She's the one who survived it all, and I get why Carrie feels this way, that she feels like she's the only one left. Truth is, though, Carrie was the good one. Carrie was the one that did nothing wrong. Carrie was the one that knew how to survive, and she was the one that didn't go too far. CJ then encourages her, says they need her good, they need her good in the future. He does. He says she deserves a fresh start. Carrie says one was enough, walks away from the pod line. Theo's then in Pilcher's office. When Rebecca comes to him, she hugs him hard. Theo pats her back, holds her for a moment. She thanks him. He says the future needs ice cream. She says they couldn't save their marriage, but he can save the town, and only he can. Now, this was a good scene. I did like seeing the scene. It reminds us that these two were in fact married, and that they definitely had problems, but they're willing to move past it, and, she feels he's the one to save the town. The Abbeys are all there, crowd against the wall. Theo goes down to the lab, and Carrie then comes in with his recorder in hand. She listened to his message about his plan. She says there is no greater good, only good. She quotes him, and basically we get this really interesting twist with Carrie, which is really the only shocking thing about this episode, the fact that Carrie, we're thinking in this episode, okay, Theo's probably going to sacrifice himself. He's going to kill himself at the end of this episode. That's what I was thinking, because that's what they did with Ethan in last season. It only makes sense to do it with Theo here. Xander will be our hero in season 3. That's what I was thinking. But no, it turns out that Carrie wants to be the one to do it. She says that she wants to serve her purpose and make things right. He says, don't do this. And Carrie says, it's already done. She drops the vial she used to infect herself, and she said the future needs more people like him and less people like her son. And she feels that because he's her son, that the guilt weighs on her. Now, I do kind of understand this. She was the one who made Pilcher such a big figure. She was the one that made Jason worship Pilcher. And she was also, of course, Jason was her spawn. So she kind of feels that she's guilty for all this, and she feels that killing her will eliminate all evil in the town. When really, that's bullshit. I mean, there's definitely going to be more evil in the town, but I do get her reasoning behind this. I definitely understand that. She feels that she's eliminating a lot of evil, and basically she says that Theo gives her a vial of morphine, says inject it in the vein 2 minutes before you go out, but says she'll still feel it. Carrie says is the right choice for both of them. She says the future won't miss her. She's just a girl from Idaho, and that's all she feels she is, just a girl. And CJ then monitors the pods and tells Theo that he shut down the non-essential systems and only the power to the pods will remain. And Theo then tells the others that he doesn't know what world they'll wake up to. He says he's seen the best and worst of them there. They need to carry the best with them. And basically, Carrie then walks out to the mountains. This was a very well done scene. I did like seeing those two cut there. Carrie, I did like seeing the cut between Theo talking to them and Carrie walking out to the mountains, knowing what she's going to do. Theo says good luck. He says he hopes to see them all soon. Everyone climbs the pod. Xander hugs Rebecca, kisses her. Frank hugs Lucy. The streets of Wayward Pines go dark. The lights go out little by little. The bloody cage where the Abbeys were held go dark, as does the carousel and the lights all over. I mean, it's really interesting to just see everything go out. And the dad left behind hangs himself from his roof, we realize, which, damn, that was dark. I mean, that really was crazy. But CJ closed the pod doors. The process begins. They're all put to sleep. Margaret stands in the light of the day before her army of Abbeys, and basically CJ readies himself for sleep. He sees a friendly hallucination he likes to talk to, and I thought that was definitely interesting. He looks at the screen where it says pod termination, and this was really strange. All of a sudden, CJ seems like he wants to press this button where he wants to possibly kill everyone, and it just felt so out of place all of a sudden. But Carrie opens the gate, walks outside the wall. CJ presses a button on his tablet, goes into his pod with the countdown of minutes ticking away. Basically, he sees a vision of his wife that makes him not do it, which it just felt so out of place. Why CJ would be the one to just eliminate the entire town made no sense whatsoever. It seemed like a very Pilcher thing to do, and it seemed like he was highly against Pilcher. So why would he do the same exact thing that Pilcher tried to do last year? Felt very out of character. I have no idea why he did that. It makes no sense whatsoever, but basically, at the end of the episode, we see CJ press a button on his tablet. He goes into his pod with the countdown minutes taking away. Carrie closed the gate behind her as she goes outside, basically to devour herself to the Abbeys. And in the end of the episode, we hear the growls of Abbeys as she does so. And then we see the end of the episode, we see this crying baby, and the season ends with an Abbey rocking the crying baby, which has the pointy ears of an Abbey, but we don't know what it is because it kind of looks human and kind of looks like half human, half Abbey, and that's the way the episode ends. So, yeah, really not much of a cliffhanger here. I mean, that's basically how we end things, but let's get into this overall because I have a lot to say. problem with this episode, and this is definitely a pretty big problem in the sense that there was no tension. There really wasn't. I mean, we knew everything that was going to go down. It seemed like they created this really cool idea of leaving all these people behind and leaving them to fight out, the rest of Wayward Pines and fight off these Abbeys. But then in the end, Theo decided that he's going to save everyone, and it just really didn't do much of anything. The man hanging himself, I mean, that just didn't, it just was so lazy, honestly. This was a very lazy finale. It felt very predictable, and it also felt like the reason that they didn't want to kill anyone was because they're thinking they're going to be renewed for a third season. And I'm going to say right off the bat, I don't think this show's being renewed for a third season. I just don't think they have much of a chance. Most people turned away after they found out there was a second season, and I don't really think they're going to get a third season. So there's really not much to talk about heading into next season because they didn't really give us much to work with here. I mean, we know everyone's going to wake up at some point, but other than that, there's not really much here except who was that thing at the end? Is it an Abby? Is it a baby? I mean, I don't really care. That's just not much of a cliffhanger for me. And I wanted something big. I wanted them to do something like they did in season 1. They didn't do that here. I was expecting them to, and they didn't. So that to me makes it seems like they know they're going to be renewed for third season, but at the same time they don't, so they want to end it right. And everyone going back to sleep seems like a good ending, but it's really not a good ending because there just wasn't too much going on here. There wasn't much of a threat. I didn't really feel like they did much with a lot of the things felt very half-assed, and here's what I think the main problem this season is. It's that they created these narratives that were very intriguing, but they just didn't know how to handle them in the end because they focused so much on the Abbeys and the war going on. They just didn't really know how to balance it all out, and it just didn't work in the way I think they wanted it to. And to be truthful with you guys, I don't ever think the second season was ultimately that necessary. I really don't think it was. I mean, was it a good second season? Yeah, I will say I don't think it was a terrible season by any means, but I just think when looking back at the season, we didn't really need this, to be honest. We could have just moved on. We could have just moved on from the rest of season 1 and been done with that. I think that would have been a good ending, is just seeing that the world's never going to change. That would have been a good ending. But having everyone go back into sleep, I mean, it just doesn't feel like this second season was really worth it. It just didn't really seem like this had a clear direction of where they were headed. I think there were things that they wanted to do, and they just didn't really get to do them because they just focused too much on characters, and this season really didn't have that much of compelling characters. There were compelling characters last year. Pam Pilcher, for example, one of the best characters of last year, and all the characters they brought in from season 1, remember, they killed off, and it just didn't really work. What the hell happened to Adam Hasler? He's not dead. What happened to him? We didn't even see him in this episode. What happened to that character? He's not dead. We didn't see him die in episode 8, so what the hell happened to him? I have no idea. It doesn't make any sense why he just disappeared. But this episode in general, I just thought was very weak and just wasn't really a great way to end the season. But like I said, the season overall just never felt like the stakes were that high. I mean, you knew obviously there was a conflict going on with the Abbeys, and you definitely kind of felt that threat at points. But it always felt like we were just getting started. It never felt like this was the final moments. It never felt like this was, this is everything's on the line, things like that. It never felt like the stakes were that high. There wasn't ever that high amount of tension that I wanted. Last season when Pilcher was going to, make everything dark and basically kill everyone and release the Abbeys on the town, you knew shit was going to go down, and shit did go down. People got hurt, things like that. People died, and a lot of people died, actually. Their main character died. I mean, there just wasn't that, amount of tension here. It felt very half-assed, it felt very unfinished, and it just felt like this season didn't really need to be made. As much as I like the character of Theo, as much as I like the character of Rebecca, they just didn't really do much with them. Xander, in general, was never really that compelling of a character. What was the point of him? I don't really know. What was the point? CJ was the most interesting character, I have to say here. I think he definitely had the best stuff going on this season. But really, at the end of the day, guys, I'm still going to give Wayward Pines Season 2, even though it was pointless, and even though it didn't really serve as much of a purpose as I wanted to in the end, I'm still going to give this season a 3.5 out of 5, or a B-. Not a bad season by any means, but just not really a necessary season. I don't really know why we had to come back, and I don't know if there's going to be a Season 3. I think the chances are very highly unlikely. A lot of people turned away, and unfortunately, I just don't think it was the best ending they could have given it. I think it could have had a much stronger ending, then could have a much stronger hook, and you just never really felt the real tension this season, and really lessened a lot of the impact for what was going on here. And just to go back on that, there were a lot of times this season where I'm just questioning, why am I still watching the show? Even though there were some things I really love, like everything in episode 7, there were so many great things there, with them exploring the Abbeys and showing how they're different from the humans, it just never really delivered. It always felt very half-assed, it always felt very predictable, and a lot of the lines felt very cookie cutter. The show was very cheesy at times and just didn't deliver in the way I wanted to. And it did have great characters like Rebecca, but for every Rebecca, there was a Jason and there was a Megan, and those characters just never really clicked, and they never did what you wanted to do. The first season did pretty much everything a good miniseries should do, and this season just didn't really deliver. I don't really think it was needed, and really that's why I gave the season the grade that it gets. But overall, guys, that's it. Season 2 Wayward Pines is over, and the show might be over as well, so I don't really know if we're continuing from here. And let me just say right off the bat that there were some really good ideas presented here. Again, there were some great episodes towards the end. Episode 9, I think, kind of killed this entire thing. This whole thing with Carrie just was kind of pointless. It didn't really do Carrie and Jason being mother and son, didn't really do much of anything. I think we focused way too much on that in the last 2 episodes. But let me know what you guys thought of this season overall. What did you think of this finale? For me, this finale really didn't do much of anything. It was very predictable, very boring. I could see where it was going. It presented some interesting ideas, but in the end, it didn't deliver at all. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoy it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for tonight's episode of Mr. Robot, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.